So the main topic of the panel today is mentoring. So I'm just going to touch very briefly on what mentoring is, because there's, I think, a lot of misconceptions about it. I think some people think that it's requesting mentoring is a sign of weakness. I think very much we feel that it is not. Requesting mentoring is very much a sign of strength. It's recognition in yourself that perhaps there are areas you want to work on, or there's areas of advice that you like. And it's very much a key ethos of women in racing. So what is mentoring? I did look it up just to see if we can have a definition, and it's actually not as easy to define as you might think. There are over 50 different definitions of mentoring. So if you'll excuse me for a moment while I channel my inner Susie Dent, the term mentor derives from the character of the same name in Homer's Odyssey. When Odysseus, king of Ithaca, left to fight in the Trojan War, he asked his friend Mentor to advise and teach his son. And over time, the term mentor came to refer to someone who was a guide and an educator. So, if you excuse the history lesson, today we generally accept mentoring to mean a form of training, learning, or development, personal development, or developing career. So, I think the first, most obvious question to the panel is, have you been mentored, and how did it make a difference for you?
I actively asked somebody that I really respected in the racing industry and I really liked to be my mentor when I was working at the BHA, and that person said yes, which was a great surprise to me because they were a very busy person. They are a very busy person. And just being a bit brave and saying, would you consider being my mentor? And actually what that meant was we sat down for a coffee every 3 months and talked a bit, chatted, words of wisdom, bit of advice, but actually that went on for a few years and was brilliant. And I don't think if it hadn't have been for the Women in Racing mentoring program, that was not through that actually, but knowing that existed and that there were people in very senior positions who were willing to give up their time for nothing to help other people gave me the confidence to then say, will you do that for me? And I've just got a new mentor through Cheryl, which is exciting, and I can't wait to dig into things with them.
Brilliant. Anybody else?
Can I go on the opposite?
Yes, you go. Yeah.
Just I have never had a mentor, but I have, or the company has paid for very expensive coaching and business coaching, but work coaching. And I would just say that that is very similar to having a mentor, but it costs a lot of money. So I would advise anyone who's even swithering to consider using the Women in Racing mentoring program, because it's free and there's masses of experience out there, and you look at the people, and if it doesn't work for you, you give it up and you move on and you try again. But I just think it's a huge opportunity for people.
Yeah, and certainly the way that the mentoring program works is if you make an initial contact, usually through me, we'll have a conversation about what are you looking for, what is it you're looking for in a mentor, or what is it you want to work on yourself. We can then discuss the options. Have you got any ideas? Some people come to me and say, I've seen that person and I want to talk to them. Or they say, I'm not sure, who do you recommend? And we work it out together. And then I contact the mentor, say, do you have the available time? Because some of our mentors are very, very busy. A few of them have said to me, look, I can only take 2 or 3 people on at any one time. So sometimes it might be a question of, look, this person isn't available now, but we can come back to them later, or we can look at somebody else. I match you together and then I leave you to get on with it. You set the terms of your own mentoring, whether it's, as you said, a conversation every couple of months over a cup of coffee, or a regular phone call, or a Zoom these days, or meeting in person at an event. It's entirely led by you and how you want it to go. And if it doesn't work out, you just come back to me and say, look, can we try somebody else? And nobody is going to be offended. We all know that we don't always get on. Personalities clash. You don't always get what you want. And also, if you think, you know what, this person's given me what I need, but now I need something else, there is no limit to how many times you can be mentored. So if you think you want to just carry on rolling from mentor to mentor, brilliant. It keeps them all occupied. It means, we've done a lot of work on expanding the number of mentors that we've got. We've now got, like I said earlier, over 40 women who are volunteering their time. And so now it's getting the word out to members like yourselves and saying, come and take advantage of this. Look at this breadth of experience that you've got in front of you, the collective years of working in racing, and also women that don't work in racing but can offer something from a business perspective or from coaching and well-being, that kind of thing. It's all there, it's all available. But does anybody else want to say anything on?
My mind jumped back, because I think mentors can come in, different guises really. And my mind jumped back to that very first job that I spoke about, to Pam. Pam was a new head girl that came into that yard. And if anyone was a mentor to me when I was very young, it was her. And I can remember standing desperately wanting to learn how to clip horses, and Pam was an ace. She was brilliant, but I was far too scared to ask her, if she'd teach me. But somehow she just knew, she knew that I wanted to learn, and she really took me under her wing. And I remember what it was about that was it was just her time, her kindness, her showing me, taking the time out to show me how to do things that nobody else had time for. And to me, she was a great mentor, and she made such a difference, I think, at a really early time in my life. But it was she listened, she was kind, and she showed me the way.
And through things like that, your interest, your enthusiasm can be sparked, engaged, grow. I mean, I had a senior lawyer sort of mentor me. I mean, I think she might have called it managing me. But if there is one person who was responsible for getting me from being that rather errant trainee solicitor who all I really was interested in was horses, to finally managing quite a large part of the firm and having the confidence to engage with new clients and ending up being top rated in my area in all the legal directories. It was Christine Berry, who you also know. She was responsible for that. So she might have called it managing, though, I have to say.
Strangely, I've been a member of the House of Lords for 10 years. And the House of Lords is a really intimidating environment, actually. It's quite a it's certainly a patriarchy. And I became friends with a Labour baroness called Margaret McDonough. And very, very sadly, she died last year. And I didn't ever ask her to be my mentor, and she never really offered. But we became friends, and she got at least 20 years more experience of politics than I had. And she guided me. And with, as you said, it's sort of kindness, finding time, and being there when you didn't even really know you needed help. Margaret would just appear and say, come and have a cup of coffee. And you look stressed, talk me through it. And it's that sort of a very human relationship. And when you realise that actually everybody has feet of clay, everyone's a human being, doesn't matter how senior, they're often the really senior, really busy people are the ones who magically find time for you. And you just have to have the courage to ask them.
Well, there's a saying, isn't there? If you want something done, find a busy woman.
person.
Yep.
Can we have a word about reverse mentoring?
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely,
yes.
yeah.
Because that's something that was brought onto my radar a few years ago about certain corporate companies having what they call a shadow board, which is people at board level, everybody having a very junior equal and opposite. And the idea with that is then that those people that are in very senior positions, often of older age because they've got lots of experience, then have somebody early in the stages of their career to reflect back off and tell them what they're missing. And that's definitely something I've taken on board, is trying to really learn and listen from people in their early 20s in particular, or even younger, who just know what's going on in the world in a way that I just really don't, and what the future is looking like. And I think it's having read a bit more about that, and Matthew Syed, for anyone who's read any of his books, he writes a bit about it in one of his books, and it's really interesting, but is not widely done, and particularly not in racing. But I think is definitely something to look into and encourage from a working perspective. If we're in positions of responsibility, looking to write who can be the shadow board, in inverted commas, within each of our individual yards, organisations, places of work. And that's something I have got increasingly interested in with time as well.
Yeah. Another aspect of mentoring that Women in Racing very much advocates for as well is sponsorship mentoring. So obviously one of the things we want to do is help women advance through their careers and move into more senior positions. And one way that quite often works is that somebody will come to the mentoring programme and say, okay, please match with a mentor. And that mentor recognises something in them. This person's got something, she's going somewhere, she's got a lot of potential. So let's see what we can do to help. And it might just be having a conversation with a colleague and saying, have you met this person? You should have a conversation with her, or if you're aware of any roles that might suit her, let us know. And Women in Racing has been around for 15 years, and most of that time, probably more than 15 years now, most of that time has been working in the background, and we have actually helped manoeuvre, if you like, a lot of women into more senior roles through this process, just simply through events like this, networking, just chatting with somebody. You don't know that the person you're speaking to may be aware of a job role that's coming up or something that might suit you. You may make a comment in passing that triggers somebody's interest. So again, networking is, Dawn said at the start, sometimes it's just about being in the right place at the right time. So taking advantage of these events, turning up and listening to these panels, coming along to other events, and just generally involving yourself and being out there, putting yourself out. It's a scary thing, putting yourself out there. I think we'd probably all admit to being terrified of doing. I know, sat last night writing my notes ready for this, thinking, oh God, I've got to sit in front of all these people. I've got to manage a panel of very experienced ladies, and get everybody to talk about mentoring, about the experiences that we all have. So I think it's just really key that we do focus on those things. So I suppose just to reflect a little bit back on Women in Racing, how important as a panel do you feel that programmes not just Women in Racing alone, but these sorts of industry panels are in terms of mentoring, in terms of helping women in the industry?
It doesn't happen by magic. It happens by people getting together and supporting each other. So I think, and I've spent 5 or 6 years in the NHS, which is actually much better at this than Racing Up, to be honest. A much more culturally diverse workforce, and yet they beat themselves up all the time about how they could be better. And they do it through sort of peer group support and organisations like this. So you deserve huge respect for what you do, and that's why I came to try and help.
I really do think racing is behind. Part of the reason that I left racing and started in the law is because of sexism and misogyny. What a surprise. Little did I know. Little did I know, but anyway, I know now. And sort of slightly as I was thinking about what we would be talking about today, you may know that they do a picture of all new market trainers every so often. Well, they did the 2024 picture about 3 weeks ago, something like that. Looked at this picture, there are 3 women in it, 3. And then I thought, haven't we got that 1996 picture of the new market trainers? Let's have a look at that. There are 3 women in that. And okay, we in 2024 could think about another 4 women trainers who were not in that picture, but then there were probably also another 10 other men who were not in that photograph. And it indicated to me just how you cannot be what you cannot see.
Yeah.
And, there was me working away in racing. It was not possible to be a trainer as a woman. It was just not possible. The women in the first photograph were Di Hayne, Julie Cecil, and Alex Mbirikos. Absolutely all of them with feet firmly in the racing industry. I had no feet in the racing industry, none at all. I started working in the yard with no background. So I think we've got a long way to go, is the truth.
I was on one of these first panels 15 years ago and was asked the question about women in racing, and at that time I kind of probably very naively said I really didn't think it was a problem and I thought we all had a great opportunity. Unfortunately, 10, 15 years later, I would not have the same sentiment. I'd say we're absolutely miles behind. There was a very good piece in the TDN very recently, I think it was Cassie Tully from Coolmore and Young Guns, and she just said this industry is so far behind, and she thinks it is in danger of, like the dinosaurs, going out with bones, but because of our lack of diversity and I think I hate to say it in front of a lot of young women, but I think it's a very difficult industry.
I think we'll probably move towards racing home, and I would say, Naomi, you're probably better to talk about it than I am, having been a fairly recent joiner to the Women in Racing Committee. So do you want to just explain a little bit about Racing Home and what it does?
Racing Home is a project that started off the back of some research that Women in Racing put out quite a while ago now, about the state of women in the horse racing industry. And off the back of that, we formed the Racing Home project, which has been supported across the industry brilliantly. And what it has consisted of is legal advice for anybody who works in the industry, particularly around working parents, working mothers, pregnancy and parenthood. There's been a free physio project that's been piloted in Newmarket, Lambourne and Midland for anyone who is pregnant. So there was free physio sessions for anybody to help with a return to work if you wanted. We've had a podcast, which is how I got started, and since then, interestingly, off the basis of what you've all just said, we're now launching a new collaboration. We were approached by Formula One and sailing, which are also gender equal sports at the top level, and where men and women, theoretically in Formula One's case, can compete alongside one another at the top level. And having sat in a few meetings with multiple sports now, and I also do some work in the Women's Sport Collective as well, we are actually doing better than you think compared to quite a lot of other sports, and particularly gender equal sports. In sailing, there's things like the America's Cup, the Round the World Yacht Race, the Volvo Ocean Race. All of those are theoretically gender equal. And I was just having a conversation with Sheila Bailey before about sailing, and that is a very difficult sport. There hasn't been a woman in Formula One for 50 years or so. So that's got a long way to go. We have a really long way to go, undoubtedly, we really do. But the success of women at the top level in racing, particularly within the last 5 to 7 years, is a really massive badge of honour compared to other sports. And I think when you start looking at the kind of wider sporting landscape, there's work to do for everybody. And I think particularly in terms of not just gender equality, like Dido mentioned, it's any of the protected characteristics. And we do have a lot of work to do. There is absolutely no denying that. But I think in racing, in some respects, we're on a good path at least.
We are all here after all.
You should
That's
say
a
we
start.
have Dido now.
We have
Well,
Dido.
I am very mindful that
Julie Harrington was just leaving
Yeah,
BHA. So I mean, there are women at the top level, so maybe I'm being too negative.
I mean, on the radio on the way up here, I heard 6 Olympians,
Yeah.
gold medals, mums.
Yeah.
yes.
And they celebrate it. There was the mums, the children coming down, holding the medals with them, everything. I just don't see it in this sport. I don't see that happening at the minute, and I hope to God it does. And I wish there'd been this mentoring panel when I was younger, because where would I be now? The world's my oyster, but I've been fighting all along to get to where I've had to go, and it would have been nice to have had this sort of support as a younger person. And that's why I give back as much as I can on the yard and show the girls, no, you're not just a stable lass. Look at what we can find you. Look at all this in front of you. You find your career, you find your path, and we will help you every step of the way. There's a lot more out there for you than just being on the yard. So it's just finding the right path, and step by step, hopefully we'll get there. But as a young girl, when I came into racing and going into the weighing rooms and just the things that happen with the men in there, and you just think this is wrong from all. So to bring younger girls in now, things have got to change. And even now going into the girls' change room, they are in a little box. You go into the men's one and they've got ample room, and still they have to go into the men's change rooms to go and get their saddles, go and get the girths, go and get the weight cloths. Why are they having to go into there? Why is there not a separate room that can be used for both people to go into? The women and the men are meet in the middle. Why have the women got to go into the men's changing rooms? It's just not somewhere this time that should be happening. And the same now with the safeguarding, where I'm on for NARS, we're having to really push with the race courses to have a lockable cubicle for a lady to go and have a shower in. Not a curtain that's being pulled across, which is what is in still a lot of the race courses. We need lockable cubicles so they can go, oh, well, we don't have under 18 stay the night. No, but I'm a 16-year girl. I've ridden 5 lots this morning. I was in work at 7. I've done my horses. I've mucked out. It's lunchtime. I've got in a lorry. I've gone racing. It's evening meet. I want a shower. I want to be clean and fresh to meet the owners, to do my horse and look presentable. So they're still coming in, and these changes got to happen quicker.
I think also just having the showcases of the role models, like you mentioned Julie Harrington, she had a baby at 16, you know, which is people didn't talk about these things. And I think the more we talk about, yeah, you can have a kid early or later or whenever, and you can still be really successful and
come back
and be brilliant at whatever you choose to do and however you choose to do it. And I think it's the more we have open conversations about things like safeguarding, mentoring, successful women, and just days like today, it works.
For women and girls, what do you think the racing industry could do just as an initial step to make, you know, those? I mean, we talk about the racing school. The intake at the racing school is 70% female, but we lose them along the way. So what can we do to make it more of a viable career option with a career progression for them?
They all want to come in and be that jockey, and I don't think whether I'm right or wrong, but at the racing school they're showing them the bigger picture right from the word go. They're coming in and it's a stable staff or a jockey. There's not different. The umbrella's so big in the racing industry, so many different jobs. If you can see straight away that it's not for them, show them the different options that are out there back at the racing schools.
Once people are in the industry, the one thing that the industry could look at doing, or organisations can look at doing, is making sure that they prioritise the well-being of everybody that is in the industry. And I think we're very far behind on that front. And you know, the industry needs to lead with well-being in mind, and it needs to create healthy, thriving cultures. You know, where people can stay and they can be well. You know, and I just think that that's not something that is a priority. And I think people burn out quickly, you know, and people leave, and good people leave jobs because of that. So it's great to get people in, but when they're in, who's looking after them? And it's not just about providing, you know, fruit bowls and counselling and things like that. It's about really looking at, you know, what culture do we have in the industry. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I was going to say culture in, well, all working environments is an absolutely vital thing, and it's set by the person at the top. If it's not set by the person at the top, it's set by the person with the strongest personality, if the person at the top doesn't stop them. And Simone and I were speaking about something else the other day, and you said that something had come up in your research to do with how we speak to one another in the workplace. And since we had that conversation, and since I heard Eleanor Bowden speak on, I think it was the last mentoring webinar, I've been reflecting on that. And I think about how people do speak to one another in yards, the sort of thing they yell at one another across the heath, and how they say things when they think they've been cut up that they would not possibly say to somebody who cut them up with the shopping trolley in Tesco's. You know, the sort of thing. Those are things that do make people pack it in. I've had enough of being spoken to like that, therefore, who needs it? So that is the thing that actually people could do if they wanted to, and they recognised it as an issue straight away, and it is an issue.
Listening to everybody talk, is something that we could do in racing is explain the sort of economic logic for doing this. As well as as well as the moral logic, and I'm not meaning to in any way diminish the importance of the moral logic, but this is an industry where we find it really hard to attract people, we find it really hard to retain people, and yet we're ignoring half the population if we're not careful, and then we're not treating the people who come in particularly well at all. So it's a good basic people management would make a huge difference to what most employers in the sport tell me is their single biggest problem, which is they can't recruit and attract and retain people. So there's a business logic for this. Whether you're a small business person or a very large group like the Jockey Club, we've got to get better at the people basics. At the way that we look after people, the culture that we set, the leadership behaviours we encourage, the training, the development, the teaching people to have honest conversations in a kind but nonetheless honest way. That's the basics that there's an economic logic we need to keep reminding ourselves and everyone about.
And that's been evidenced. Professor Richard Layard.
Yes, I know.
You know
Richard
him.
very well.
You know him.
Yes.
If you follow him, a Wellbeing at Work podcast. Absolutely, very, very, very strong economic case for putting wellbeing at the heart of every strategy.
And it's got to come from the top. It's got to come from the trainers. The trainers have got to get on board. And until we get the trainers on board, it's not going to flow down and affect everybody.
To wait a generation?
I do. I do. I think there's a lot of ones and they go, oh, they're just old school. And it's like, you can't, it's not an answer anymore. It's not old school. Everyone's got to get on board.
This is something that's come up a lot in Racing Home because provision of childcare is a very, very common reason for people leaving the industry. We work at unsociable hours, morning or night or both, and if you've got small children or you've got to do school pickups, it's really difficult. And even in racing centres, the lack of availability of nursery care in particular is a really big challenge for women with small children in the industry. But I think then picking out the trainers who have, I'm picking on training yards because it's a common example, but who have created flexible working conditions are maintaining their staff. But it's really interesting when you start digging, and I've spoken with Andrea about this, that it's not always the younger generation that are doing the best. We assume that the younger generation coming through are going to be more progressive. There is some of that, which is amazing, but there are also some absolutely excellent things happening in an older generation that you wouldn't expect necessarily, and there are good and bad at both ends. And I think we assumed and expected that the new generation of trainers coming through are automatically going to be better, and I'm not sure that that is the case, and that's a big piece of work we need to continue doing in order to maintain that workforce, because like Dalia said, it's a real economic thing. It's much easier to retain someone than to recruit and train someone new.
I will just say, from the perspective of a trainer in Newmarket, the staff who arrive wanting a job will quite often tell you, these are the hours I want to work. And if you have a gap that needs filling, you take them whatever hours they want to work. And they still mess you about, have many, many more days off than you might expect, or tell you they're not working those hours this week. There's some other hours that they'd like to work, thanks. So we're not at the stage where we are actually being inflexible. I don't really know many trainers who would now say, you can only work for me if you're going to work full time. And full time means this. Do we? Does anybody else? It's a supply and demand situation. They come along and once they've got the skills, say I want to work these hours, and they can. And if you can't offer it, they go somewhere else.
What piece of advice would you give to a woman or girl starting out in the industry that you wish you had been given when you first started?
I think, whether it was when I started or not, maybe I would have been too young to know this at the time, but the one piece of advice that I would give is know your core values, get to know your purpose, get to know your passion, get to know yourself as much as you possibly can, so that you don't find yourself later down the line in something where you'll feel completely misaligned and dreadfully unhappy. Well, you still might do that, but doing that work on yourself first. It's easy to say, oh, just follow your heart. That's a little bit fluffy, but actually there's lots of stuff that you can do about knowing who you are and knowing what it is you want to do with a coach or with a mentor, for example. What's important to you? Why is it important to you? Why do you want to do that? And sometimes we take jobs, don't we, that we might have to take a job just to earn a bit of extra money. I had stacked shelves once in Budgeons so that I could save up to do my HGV licence, which I never used, by the way, because I was completely misaligned. I was sitting in a lorry going down the motorway. But it taught me something. It taught me something about what I didn't want to do. So
useful.
So yeah, it's really useful. I might get it out now though. I can probably make a living out of it now. But no, I mean just knowing, being true. I think being true to your passion and your purpose. And there is a lot of work I think that you can do with coaches and with mentors just around that. So that's my advice.
I think I might have benefited if the little inner voice inside of me had been a bit more punchy, to be honest. And I think I've gone quite a long way in a career I never particularly wanted to start. But I might have got a bit further, a bit quicker, if I'd had a little voice in my head saying, why not me? And why not now? Because when you're being promoted, becoming a partner, getting on this board, getting on that board, there is a man saying that. And I wasn't saying that. And it was only afterwards when I thought, I'm as good as these people. Why am I not on that board? And it's because I didn't have that voice in my head.
Mine's very similar. Don't wait for someone to tell you you're good enough. Go out and find the resources, find the courses or the mentoring or something, and make yourself good enough. Don't wait for someone to say, oh, you could do that course. Go and find it yourself and put yourself where you want to be.
Dawn gave my favourite one this morning, which is go to as much as you can, because it's all about meeting people. And I'm a really big believer that your network is your power and the people around you, which leads on to the one I usually give is don't be afraid to take risks and don't be afraid to ask for help, because the most surprising people will help you, and sometimes the risks that you don't think that you should jump into with both feet are the ones that prove to be the best decisions you've ever made. Not always to be recommended, but
As I say, there's always no silly questions.
well, yeah, exactly. So
Despite what everybody here will think, I would say a lot of us women probably do suffer from imposter syndrome and think we're not. I mean, people here will be thinking, Jesus, Dawn's never suffered from imposter syndrome in her life. But I think I do, and I think it was, what Sarah and Rachel said, believe in your own strengths and what you're good at, and don't wait for a man to tell you whether you are good enough.
I totally agree. I have the imposter syndrome too. The other one I would add in is I think it's the corollary of the imposter syndrome. That when I was in my 20s and 30s, I was so busy feeling like I didn't deserve to be in the room, usually as the only woman, that I felt I needed to prove all the time that I did deserve it. And as a result, I scared the living daylights out of all the men. and so remembering actually that you are terrifying to the male of the species. Often in these environments where, and all of you in this room will be in this position, you're the path-breaking generation in our sport. And so just having that crumb of empathy for how scary that is for everybody else. And in doing that, you then relax and you be yourself rather than feeling like you have to prove something. And I wish I'd known that when I was in my 20s.
I always say to people that mention imposter syndrome, if you've got 5 minutes, there's a fantastic video of Michelle Obama on YouTube talking about imposter syndrome, and you sort of think to yourself, well, if she feels, if someone like Michelle Obama feels like she has imposter syndrome, what hope is there for the rest of us? But she, as you said, she quite rightly said it took her a while, and she'd be thinking, I don't deserve to be in this room, until she realised, yeah, there is somebody that doesn't deserve to be in this room, and it's him. It's him right there, who's been told his whole life, you deserve to be there. And the problem is we don't tell women, you deserve to be in that room. You should be there. Don't let other people take up your space. Get the elbows out and make space for yourself. And hopefully through events like this, through networking like this, we can help each other manoeuvre into those positions as well. So I'm now going to throw out to you in the room. Does anybody have any questions on anything we've touched on, or any other particular questions you want to ask any of the panel? There must be somebody. Go ahead.
My question is at the exact other end of most of the work that Women in Racing has done in the past few years. Brilliant work, and I wish it had been around an awful number of years ago. When are you going to consider the other end of the scale? Because ageism is just as rife in this industry, if not more so.
Salisbury Racecourse, for anyone who has anything to do with that, have done some brilliant work around menopause. They have something called Walk and Talk, which they introduced and has been absolutely brilliant. And we are in the pipeline on work for women later in their career as well.
It's amazing when you look at, until recently, the 2 prime candidates for the biggest jobs in the world were 80-plus-year-olds. They were definitely aging males.
They weren't great examples, though.
I think the younger woman is looking better.
Does ageism, can I ask what age you're thinking of? Because actually menopause is probably midlife.
From where I'm looking at it, yes, but I think once you turn 60, you're competing with people who don't have that imposter syndrome because they grew up, thankfully for them, in an age when it wasn't an issue. So you're competing with people who haven't got anything like the amount of experience, but aren't saddled with some of the doubts that some of us might have had. So I think that 60 mark is a really difficult one.
I've been told by a trainer, anyone over 40 in the industry is old and past it. And sat there and said it to my face, and I'm like, this has got to change. We're losing women who've gone and had families, and they're not coming back. And all that knowledge and experience has just gone.
Wasted.
Yes.
Has anyone ever done a survey on, senior people in racing, male, female? Because there are a lot of ageing men in top roles in racing.
There's a new study on
As in life.
There's a new study coming from Loughborough University about representation of women in the horse racing industry, which is going on currently. Yeah.
Results, I'm sure.
When I went to Welsh Parliament and was asked to sit in and have a talk with them, it was me surrounded by males. And they listened, and I've emailed, the fellow at the BHA trying to get back in there and follow up all these talks and see what's happening. But they've fallen on deaf ears at the minute. But I am pushing and pushing to get back in there to try and help and improve. Just for the younger ones coming into the industry, I said there's just not enough. This is for Wales, for them there to bring people in. But it has
And I think
3
the
men.
shadow boards you were talking about are really interesting, because that does give the young woman, man, a sort of an opportunity to see how business works at the top, and also, as you say, to challenge the thinking.
There's a good example from the fashion industry where, now I forget which 2 companies it was, and I might be committing some sort of horrible libel, but I think it was Gucci and Dolce & Gabbana, and one of them took on a shadow board in the early part of the 2000s, just at the point at which social media was becoming a thing, and they recognised that they needed to get on board with the new social media platforms. Sales went through the roof. They had young influencers at the time when it was becoming a thing to have people on the street wearing your clothes, getting photographed, that being a really good way of marketing your fashion. Whichever other company it was didn't do that, got left way behind. Their sales went like that and like that. And so it just was one of those examples of when the knowledge and insight and wisdom from somebody who's in their 20s is completely different from the knowledge and insight and wisdom of someone in their 60s, and leads to a completely different trajectory of a company.
Just a racing home related question. Are you also going into stud work with Racing Home? Because I used to work in stud work, and actually one really big factor for why I left was because I didn't see any women at the highest level who I could compare myself to, who had, obviously not everyone wants to have families, I'm not saying that, but I personally do in the future, and I didn't really see any kind of comparisons to work towards.
Yeah, so we
focused on racing now.
Yeah, definitely, and Eileen's probably a good person to mention in here. Like in terms of working with bloodstock and studs, Anna Kerr at the National Stud has been a really big advocate.
Like my accidental mentor.
Well, that is wonderful to hear, and I think definitely getting studs involved and on board is a really important area. I think. It's easy in racing to look at horses in training and training yards, but actually the breeding industry is obviously a massive, massive, massive part of the picture, and just incorporating all of that together, yes, is the short answer.
I'll pipe up there if I can for a minute. So I'm from a stud background and a coach as well. And I think that what you said is really interesting, because I actually had my first employee maternity in 20 years, which is amazing, because it's all women that work with us. And we used Racing Home, which was fantastic because I knew about it through Women in Racing. But it very much still feels that racing is over here and stud is over here, and we're completely disjointed. Neither know about each other. We've had trainers come to the farm and say, "Oh my God, your foals leave their mothers at 6 months." I'm going, "Really? Are you serious? You didn't know that?" And vice versa. I go to training yards and see things that I didn't know about. And there's a huge crossover that could happen when people aren't able to ride out anymore for different reasons. There's staff there that have great experience and could cross over into racing, into stud farms, and vice versa. But what I wanted to come back to, so Racing Home was brilliant for me. It was absolutely amazing because it was new to me, and it was also brilliant for my employee. So it's a great, website for both sides. But just quickly back to the great panel, and it's been amazing listening to you all. We got so good at horse welfare, and worried about our social license, and we were so brilliant at that. We got horsepower up there and the website. We are so bad at people welfare.
Yeah.
So bad. And it's business critical. And nobody sees that. And that's why it's great to hear, and some of you on the panel are committed to that, to make changes there, because the people that are coming into our industry now, as we know, will not stand for the culture that we have currently. They just won't. Mm-hmm. So it's business critical that we look at that more deeply. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just touch on that, coming back to, you were saying, Sarah, it comes from the top, and we need to get the trainers to help how their workers communicate with each other. Could there be introduced training days for trainers, say Newmarket and Glamorgan and in West Country, all areas of, so not just sort of teaching the youngsters, but the old school trainers go to training days, go to talks like this to sort of enhance and strengthen how important it is that working environment is kept healthy, kept consciously, or is that just something?
Oh no, 100%. But you get them there.
Try and get them in the room.
Just get them to read an email, because they come through and I see them and I talk about it. Oh, we ain't got time for that.
I mean,
I'm busy.
It's something that would probably have to come through the BHA itself.
Yeah, and unless it's made mandatory and something that's got to be done to get your licence, it's not going to happen.
Because
It's not going to happen.
I went through the licence process and we, you know, they were good on, you know, trying to say that a healthy environment, you keep good staff, you need a good environment, give, you know, good guidelines, and it comes from the top and lead by Christian experience.
Yeah.
So,
Was that on the trainer's course?
yeah.
Because that exact module that they run on the trainer's course has been run for trainers and assistants at the British Racing School. Liking the nods over there. I'm thinking I'm a bit off piste here. I'm slightly off piste, but I'm not that off piste because I went to it, so I know. And there was some excellent training. It was actually some of the best training I've ever been to in my life, and I've been to a lot. And I'm not absolutely certain that is the answer. So I'm not absolutely certain that mandatory training is the answer. I'm not saying I really know what the answer is, but I feel like that actually trainers are among the most licensed, regulated, overseen folks that have to cheerlead for the industry, and it's terrible prize money, recruit more owners in, have a horse in training. You can maybe, if your horse is good enough, maybe have a chance of winning a share of this terrible prize money. And at the same time, at the other end of it, they have people not paying them, staff not turning up. Any of this ringing any bells at all, Andrea?
Absolutely rings every bell with me. And I'm looking forward to the people strategy when it comes as to, you know, all of these issues that everyone's talked about and how we are going to address them, because I think everybody knows that we need to do so much, but what it looks like and how it's going to be, obviously we're just waiting, aren't we? But trainers are incredibly hard-working individuals who are also under the immense stress. I'm not vindicating any poor management, poor culture, poor behaviour or anything, because I'm absolutely dead against it all. Mentoring for trainers, coaching for trainers, jockeys we've got it right, I think, with the jockey coaching. We've got some fantastic coaches providing fantastic support. Maybe it's more coaching and mentoring and supporting.
And signposting.
And signposting. And then having the people there that can, you know, be called in to come and provide help and support, you know, on the legal front, on the employment law front, on the culture front, on the welfare front.
I've heard the word trainer a lot in this room today, and I have a huge empathy for trainers. I did a small piece of research identifying occupational stress for trainers. It was the first time anybody had even looked at the trainer in terms of research, and it took it. That piece of research took an emotional toll on me because of the stuff that I heard, and because of the pressure and the stress that trainers are under. They're as much a part of a very highly precarious system and probably hold more responsibility than anyone. So it is really need to understand their position as well. And I'm not condoning any bad behaviour at all, but where is bad behaviour coming from? Is the question. Why? Why do people talk like they do to each other at times?
Because it's been accepted and not challenged.
Yeah, there's that.
In the workplace.
Of course.
And so there is a real need for a shift in culture and how we speak to each other and what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And there are massive training implications for that. But I think there's an appetite for it.
Yeah.
There's an appetite for it from the women in the industry on that front, but there's an appetite from your workers who are coming from other cultures and the cultures that they're bringing, and the kind of problems that they face. So it's all those kind of protected characteristics and all the people who are coming from all those different perspectives, really.
And there is, in fact, an industry code of conduct.
Yeah.
Is there not? It
Yeah.
was news to me. It was news to me until I did get some particularly excellent piece of abuse on the heath one day. And I thought, that is not okay. Why does anybody think that that is okay? And I thought, well, I wonder if there is a code of conduct on this, because if there isn't, there should be. Anyway, there is.
And a lot of yards are now using that as part of their induction process, which is a real step forward. And actually, in some bigger yards, that's been rolled out to everybody. So even though you now get it on induction, it's actually been backtracked to everybody else in the business, so that everyone knows what the new people are expecting, but also what you should already be doing. So there's like great stuff. It's just how it's going to roll out, and that that's got to be the right people strategy, hasn't it?
Can I just say, I mean, we're talking very much about racing yards and studs, whereas I'm looking around this room and I'm guessing a large percentage of these people work in office-based jobs and not in yards. And I think the problems that people see in this room might be very different. You know, people have other challenges. I know we're lucky we work here at Godolphin. There's a pretty good culture in our office, I would say. And I'm guessing in lots of the other offices you work in, but there might still be things that affect women, whereas I think we're very much concentrating on the ground racing staff, which I know is the main part of it in some ways, but there's huge amount of employment in different areas in the racing and breeding industry. With very different challenges. I know from talking to people who work in racing that their challenges are very different to my challenges in the office environment. So, what are the challenges in working in the offices? It's definitely not respect among colleagues and things. It's not things like that. It's not people not turning up. I think actually the biggest problem, I can only speak for myself here working in Godolphin, but I can see lots of people out there, that work here, it's actually career progression, because so many of the people like myself haven't moved on, and so they, how do they find the next steps and things like that? And they've got lots of qualifications, very clever young people, and I will be retiring soon. But
that
I think
glass
that's across the
ceiling
company.
is particularly on the stud side has been evidenced, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think they're very different challenges. Yeah.
Does the BHA have a kind of module, a kind of career progression modules that various, whichever stage you are at and whichever bit of the racing industry you're working in? Does it actually have an online kind of platform where you can go in and do some modules, get an NVQ, get a qualification and move on?
There's the Racing to Learn platform where there's a lot of good information that I know of, and the Careers in Racing team, I think, considering the size of them, do a really great job in promoting careers in racing. And they have done some work around pathways. Racing to Learn.
Racing to Learn are really good modules that have gone.
Yeah. So there is some good stuff out there.
I think it has been identified. I mean, I spoke to the Racing Foundation fairly recently, and they agreed that there is a gap in the middle of the industry at the moment for that career progression. The people that have worked in the industry for 5-10 years, and they want to take the next step, but perhaps they don't know how to do it, or they feel they're lacking in experience in a particular area. We have brilliant systems like Flying Start and like the BHA graduate course, which are great for getting people initially in, but it's okay, where's the next step? How do you get your foot on the next rung on the ladder? So,
the good thing is that things like plugging my course again, that it's now got CPD points attached, so you accumulate 12 CPD points if you come along to that course, and it's like, and then the Racing to Learn courses, everything you now attend in the industry has the possibility to be accredited. So you can actually start building your own kind of career progression by finding the things that you're interested in, doing the courses, and then they are certified with the.
Are they online? I mean, can you add it to? So you've got your own account, as it were. Can you do
I don't think it basically you pull together the CPD points from each course that you attend and evidence that you've attended it. But there's a huge gap, like health and safety courses, the kind of the development of that. But everything is now having the points attached to then hopefully work with that, which I think's great.
Racing to Learn is your own login, and you do your own modules on the Racing to Learn, and it is with, if we do so many modules, you are sort of credited and looked at. The I think Racing Development Programme are doing something at the minute, aren't they? And looking at who's done most modules, who's done it all in a small period of time. So it's out there for everyone to log into the Racing to Learn and do just simple things like horse handling. Yeah. It's just a half-hour module that you can do online, and just do it, and it's just your own progression, and it's all free,
If you work in the industry, it's free. You just ring up and get a
login,
and get a login, and then it's free, and you can anything you're interested in.
But it's something you can access anytime.
Yeah.
And I would say, Sarah, I hope you back me up with this. Sarah and I have just done the 2-day mental health first aid course. There were 6 of us on that. That is highly subsidised by Racing Welfare. We talked about, the welfare, how people talk to, how people are spoken to in the industry. 73 million work days are lost through people being unwell. Can we put those, we talked about the trainers, but actually people like Sarah, who are a great advocate for people coming to talk to, they would be better placed being out in the yards, the studs, the workplaces. BHA could, with the people board, could get a really easy win there, making that mandatory, that they have one person in every place, attends that 2-day course, it costs 80 quid, you've got a qualification, you can look after your staff. People aren't going to go to the trainer or your head of your studs with their struggles. They want to go to people like Sarah.
One of the biggest problems, and I'm with you, Amy, on that, and trying to get the places filled, because that course is actually normally worth about, is it 400 quid? 300-400 quid if you did it anywhere else. And as Amy said, it's subsidised by Racing Welfare to provide it for the industry. But why don't people go? Time, I suggest. Time. And that's right the way through. That's right the way through the board at that time. I mean, I was lucky enough to do the Thoroughbred Industry MBA. This doesn't exist anymore. Why? Because nobody had the time to do it.
I done that course, and then I spoke to all of my friends and all of the people I worked for, and no one had heard of it.
Yeah.
So that was.
And what a shame.
And they said they would have gone if they would have known about it, and lots of people were upset because they didn't know about it.
Yeah.
But that was but you only find out about it if you follow Racing Welfare on Instagram or Facebook, but you don't actually find out about any otherwise. So
you're talking about the mental health course.
Yeah, so unless you're proactive yourself, you don't find out about it.
Or you've got a very good secretary or somebody on the yard who's going to pass this information on, because the trainers, they're busy, they ain't going to pass the information on down to the staff.
So how do you make it? How do you enable people? How do you enable people to attend those courses? Is the big question, I think, really.
And everyone is going to say time.
Yeah.
They are going to say time, but I took the time out. I covered.
Did it?
I took the time out, and the yard coped. They survived without me. I was on my phone. I was doing declarations. I was sorting things out, and I got 2 part-time members of staff to cover the 2 days I was away. It can be juggled. It can happen.
That's a cultural thing though, because just coming from a veterinary background, you have to do 35 hours a year of continuing professional development to maintain your licence. That's it. So you have to create 5 days from somewhere. Everybody has to do it. And everyone knows they have to do it. And sometimes it's a scratch and you have to leave the practice when you're really busy and the boss has to go. And everyone else has to cope. And it is just built in from day one. You've got to go on CPD. That's it.
But you make it work.
But everybody makes it work. And so because that's mandatory, it's just built into everybody's annual expectations.
You get reminders.
No, you don't, and you get audited by the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons if you're not careful.
It's the same for so many other counselling, solicitors.
Yeah, and I think that we're just not in that mindset. But when you think about it, Sarah, and you say, I did this for 2 days and everybody coped.
Yeah, me coming off the yard for 2 days, and it was typical Tuesday morning, the BHA rock up, you're up for a random drug test with the horses. I flew past the yard, pulled in, and rig on, got everything out of the medicine, but I delegated it straight away. dealt with it. John had steam come out of his ears, flopping around the place, but the staff loved it because I delegated straight out to them. They all stepped up, as they do anytime. Like, I'm here today, they've all gone and stepped up, dealt with the thing, and I'll go back, we'll have a chat, we'll have some cake, and I'll go, thanks guys for everything. And they get empowered by it. And they feel better.
That's why you're what the leadership more in us. Thoroughbreds.
And they are, yeah, and they feel better for it themselves.
Yeah.
And like with me winning the awards, and the girls have come to me on the yard and gone, we want that, we want it, we want a bit of that, we want to have that, and recognition and everything. So you can take the time out.
Yeah.
It can be done.
But that's what you hear from people all the time. I mean, we used to put those courses on, didn't we? And it's devastating to put a course on like that, to have 4 people express an
and
interest.
doing something that's going to hopefully change the culture, have somebody looking out for others. You know, we know exactly when something's wrong with our horses, if they're not right, but yeah, we work alongside these staff all the time.
Needs to be a bit more of a thoughtful intervention.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Is anybody going to speak about TBA Ed?
If you want me to.
Yes, please.
Yeah, just on the subject of online education, or if people want to do courses, just like Racing to Learn, or BHA have Racing to Learn for the racing industry, there is TBA for the breeding industry. It's free to register, and there's lots of free resources that you can access in both the people management and the horse management side of it, under the context of the breeding industry. But blatant plug, if you do join the TBA, then everything on there is free, and there are about £3,000 worth of courses. So, but if anyone wants any more information, I'll happily bang on about it. But I do have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So my background before I came into the industry was in rugby union, refereeing, especially officiating in the pro game. And I still coach and mentor male and female referees at the international level, both for England rugby and world rugby. And I know you mentioned quite openly that racing is a long way behind, still got a lot to learn, and I think if you're familiar with rugby union, you'll probably remember a very famous quote about it being run by 57 old farts years ago by Will Carling, and that was true, and rugby went on is still on a very transitional journey about evolving the sport. You know, racing faced the social licence issues, rugby faced concussion issues and player welfare issues. And I see a lot of similarities of the journey that racing is on to into how rugby has had to evolve. But I think one of the really impactful key things that I learned with regard to the explosion of the sport from the women's participation, and then more selfishly from female referees, and we talked about the hashtag See It Be It. I don't think that growth would have happened had it not been for male advocacy and for males not only advocating the role of females and the impact that we can have in officiating, but also in calling out and being prepared to challenge bad behaviour, inappropriate behaviour. So my question to the panel would be, do you think racing does enough to support or identify male advocates, or could that we do more in that? Because that visibility, certainly in broadcast, certainly in media, was very powerful in helping empower women into decision-making roles, but also to increase participation.
I think that's a really well-made point. I completely agree with you. In other sort of worlds and industries, it's the male dual parent families. It's when the man leaves the meeting early because his children need him that he then empowers all of the women in the room to do the same thing. And I've seen that. I think the best thing I ever did for sort of female empowerment in companies I worked for was to have one male director become the only overseas expat in the company because his wife got a better job in California. And we encouraged Max that we would find a way of him being able to work remotely from California because we thought his wife Anna needed to take the job that she'd been offered by Google in the US. And by doing that and helping him be flexible, actually we said more about our attitude to flexible working for women than anything. So I've lived what you've described, and you've made me think. I suspect I need to sort of get some of my members some of my maybe elderly white male members, to be thinking about how, because actually I think they want to, often they don't quite know how to, and they also suffer from imposter syndrome and feel terrified about walking into a room like this to talk about it. So I think that's a really, really well made point, that we could all think about how do we adopt a male ally to help us, a male ally in a position of authority in racing, and give them the courage, because often that's all they need, is a little bit of courage to speak out.
Great. Well, I think we have overrun quite a bit, so I know we're a little bit late starting, so I think we're probably going to wrap it all up there now, but thank you very much to the panel. Everybody, well-deserved round of applause. And obviously, thank you very much as well to Dalham for hosting us all today. I think you can all agree it's been fantastic. And thank you to all of you for attending. These events don't work. Like I said, it's very demoralising. You put on events and nobody turns up. So it's brilliant that you. This is the first event I've organised for women in racing, and I'm thrilled that it's.